Hi all, welcome back to the screencast series here. So today's video is going to focus on how to get more comfortable with your Git setup. A precondition for watching this video is having Git set up on your computer, whether you're using Linux or Windows, doesn't matter, and having some set of repositories somewhere you'd like to interact with, whether they are local or on GitHub or on the Purdue GitLab page. So because previous videos have talked about the Purdue GitHub page, I'm going to actually start there. So as you may recall, the start repository is public, and if I click on that, there is a handy button here for cloning or downloading, which will give you access to all of the files that are in this repository locally. Of course, that excludes the wiki. It's all the stuff that's here, this install folder, clone.sh, the readme, but really this is just for demo purposes. Any repository you want to clone will work much the same way if it's on a GitHub sourced site. So clone is not unique, but this button is. So when you do clone or download, you'll see this dialog pop up that says clone with HTTPS, and there's a little copy link. So if I copy that, and then I open a folder and right click, say git bash here, I can do git clone. Let me actually make that quite larger. There we are. So I can say git clone and then paste, which with shift insert, and you'll see that the cloning operation happens. So now if I look around here, ls, or actually let's even do it more simply. If I minimize that, you see we now have a start repository. So this is the basic functionality for how you want to go get a Git repository. But it has some limitations. So if I close this window, I think this will work, and I right click and I open a new one, and then I go into start and I say git pull, for example. Well, I guess I've done it close enough together, it doesn't matter. So typically what will happen if you have a repository that's not open, at this point it will ask you for your login credentials, your username and password. So there are credential helpers for Git that will allow you to cache whatever your logins are. I find that to be A, tedious, and B, maybe not necessarily the best practices, because it saves those as a text file in this directory. So you'll have Git credentials and it'll show in plain text your username and your password. So especially if you're using a public machine, you probably won't want to do that. But what you can do instead is set up public key and private key pairs. So what those do is handshake together. You can send out your public key to GitHub and keep your private key locally, and then when you go to log in, you can tell Git to use those instead of using your default login credentials. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So to start, we're going to need some SSH keys. So first thing I'm going to do is cd back into the home directory, and actually I'm going to get rid of that start repository, because if I look at what's in there, .git config grep URL, you're not supposed to do grep that way, but you'll see that this has the HTTPS URL, so it's forever bound to be an HTTPS type login. Could you change that file? Certainly, but I think it's easier to just delete it and start again. So we'll remove it. Okay, the first thing that you're going to need, if this is your first time doing this on a system, then you'll want to make sure that you have an SSH folder, because that's what Linux distributions and MinTTY use by default for finding SSH keys. So if it's not there, you make one, make directory.ssh, and then we'll go into it. Now you can just follow along with this and take my word for what it is, or you can look at the man pages and create something more unique to yourself. So if we do SSH-keygen, we're going to use the key generator, -T, RSA, that is our encryption protocol. We're going to use RSA -B. This is how many bits we want this file to be, 2048. So you can make this arbitrarily large or small. Too small and somebody can brute force crack it. Too big and it takes more time when you log in. So as of now in 2020, I believe you don't get additional security from going above 2048 bits. So I'm just going to stay there, at least not for the trade-off. So it's going to ask you, where do you want to save the key? So by default, this is my home directory, that .ssh folder, and ID RSA, that's fine. Also, now it's going to ask for a passphrase. So if you have, for example, a shared computer, I recommend you go ahead and enter the passphrase here. Pick one. If it's just you and you want to have a key for every machine or for every repository, empty is just fine because you can always cancel them after the fact. So after I've pressed enter twice, it generates me this little random art image of the public key that we've created. So let's look and see what we have here. There's an IDRSA file, that's the private key, and then there's IDRSA.pub. So if I take that .pub and cat it, you'll see I have a nice long stream of random characters that are going to serve as the key that GitHub is going to use to handshake with that private key. So I'm not going to show you the private key just in case I decide to leave it on GitHub, but you're welcome to go look around in there and see what it has. So if I copy this, and by just highlighting it, I've copied in MinTTY, I can go to the System of Systems Lab page, or GitHub page, or wherever you are, click your profile picture and go to settings. Then there's this SSH and GPG keys page. At this point, you do new SSH key. I'm going to call this one demo, and paste in what you have. So you have to make sure that you got this SSH RSA. If you don't get this last bit here, what machine it was created from, that's okay, I believe, but you need all the rest of that full text. And then we do add SSH key. So now we have that available, but we haven't yet told Git how to use it. So you can make a really long command that will do this without this configuration file, but it's much easier to just go ahead and configure it like I'm about to show you. So with whatever your editor of choice is, if it's Notepad, create this file with no extension. If you want to use built-in Vim, you can do that. I'm going to edit a file. Well, let's do it like this. And we're just going to call it config, and it goes in that .ssh directory. So in here, you need a host, and that is going to be github.arcac.purdue.edu. So this tells Git whenever you say github.arcac.purdue.edu in the course of trying to connect to a server or trying to pull down a Git repository, that it should use the following set of configurations. So first, we have to tell it what the actual host name is. Conveniently, for this case, it actually is github.arcac.purdue.edu. So you can see that if you jump back over here, and let me go back to the System of Systems Lab repositories, and we'll pick start in here somewhere. There it is. So this is a matter of convenience. You can call it whatever you want in that host line, but the copy line, when I click use SSH, is git at github.arcac.purdue.edu. So that's what I want to use. So if I come back here to that file, I also need a user, which is me, and then I need an identity file. This is exactly that private key that we specified before, which is ID RSA. So if I save that, then Git knows when I say github.arcac.purdue.edu, I want to use this key, and I want to use this expansion to the host name. That's exactly the same thing. And you can have as many of these as you want. You can have one for your regular GitHub, for Purdue GitHub, for any servers you might want to connect to if you want to use a Windows client or anything like that. But it's exactly the same if you do this on Linux. So now I can close this, and let's go copy that line. So now it's copied. I'm going to go up a level. I'm going to do git clone, shift insert, and it's going to say the very first time, are you sure you want to trust this host, github.arcac.purdue.edu, and you just simply type yes. It'll never ask you this again after this point. And there you are, and there again we have start repository right there. Okay, so the next thing that you'll want to do is do your initial configuration step. So I'm going to do this by just creating a dummy repository and trying to push to it. Of course, if you have a project you're already assigned to or some work you're already doing, you don't have to do this until you get your first commit, but I want to show you what to expect when you do this. So if I make a directory, my repo, my repo, and then git init bear. So let's go up here, git clone my repo test, let's say. So we go into test. I'm going to touch a file. I'm going to add it. So you can see I have a file that's just called this. There's nothing magical that's going on right here. Then I want to git commit -m. I'm going to call this, I don't know, test commit. Doesn't really matter. When you get to this point, when Git wants to create this commit, the commit includes information about what the current state of your repository is, what the changes are that have been made, but more importantly, it records who made those changes, and you need to tell Git who you are. So to do that, simply follow the directions here. So if I do git config global user.email, and then I do my email address here, and then I do git config global user.name, puts me in, and then I can rerun that commit right here. So now if I do, for example, git log, you'll see there is one commit. It says test commit. It says who did it and when. And this is super useful when you learn the git blame command, so you can blame people for making bad commits and adding stupid stuff to the code. So what did that do for us? Well, it created a file here. It created a file that's called .gitconfig. So if you have your own personal Git repository, maybe you control your dot files, your configuration files, you should keep track of this and take it with you. There's nothing that's profound in there right now. So here's just a user and stuff that you know I have handy. But the main benefit of this file is what kinds of things you customize and you want to carry around with you for Git. So now we've made it to kind of the real how do you configure and get comfortable in your Git space. So I'm going to hop over to a different desktop here and show you the basics of Git aliases. So if you just Google Git aliases, you'll probably find a page like this. So here are some handy things you might like to have. So I'm just going to create this one right here and show you what that does. So if I do, well, let me remember what it is, git config global. Okay, so I do git config global. Sorry, that goes the other way. I can look above and see. Global alias CO is what the alias is going to be. And let me flip back over here. Checkout. Oh, checkout. So there, Git does that. If I cat my .git config, you'll see it now has an alias section, and inside of that is checkout. So you can either follow this git config global template, or you can just go edit this git config file directly. But what it's going to give you is the ability to do something like this. So if I go into test, for example, and I do git, well, let's do it the easy way. So if I do checkout -b, this says create me a branch and then switch to it. But if I am super explicit, I could say branch and then, I don't know, this branch master. And then if I do git branch to see what I have master and this branch. So if I want to go check out this branch, check out meaning look at in the context of Git, I could either type git checkout this branch. I'm going to go ahead and do it. Or now that I've created this alias, I can say git checkout, you know, I'll switch back, master. And that has the same effect. So I didn't ever actually push to master. So it says this thing about upstream being gone. Of course, if you ever see this, so there's my test commit. You just do git push -u origin master. So in this case, -u is set upstream. So you see unset upstream is already there. And then when I set the upstream, I set it to be origin, which is the name of my remotes, and master, which is the branch, which makes a lot more sense after you've done it. And you can do git branch -a. So you see here's this thing. This is the origin master. So it's just by default, I don't know why, the default branch is called master. It's not any different than any other branch. And the default remote title is origin. So if you have, you know, additional remotes, which you can add if you want to keep track of a lot of things in the same place, those will have other names, but by default it's origin. So that gets us Git aliases, but we can go a step further than that. So if I'm content to use git bash, I could do, let's fire up another one of these, git bash here. I could do make this big first. And let's use the shell to our advantage. So I could say vim.bashrc. So this .bashrc is the file that the terminal window itself uses to do any kind of aliases or anything like that. So I can say here, alias GCO, let's say, for example, equal git checkout. So if I save that and then close it. One other minor point here. So because things start with dot, by default, they're hidden. So you'll want to go in your windows and take your view and do the show hidden items. Otherwise, they're likely to be gone. Oh, it looks like maybe it does show them by default. But it's still nice to have them. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that on anyway, just so you have it. And also file name extensions. So this will make sure that you see your .git config, because sometimes Windows likes to treat this just as a file extension rather than a full file type, and then you have a bunch of blank ones and you won't know what the heck is what. So now that I've done this bash RC business, if I'm back in test, git branch, I can do something like GCO this branch. Ooh, right. Source bash RC. Of course, if you just open a new window, then this will already automatically be sourced. But if I GCO this branch, you see now it switches. So I do a lot of these kinds of things. If I just show you my my own personal machine here, so you see I by default track the repository location, what branch I'm on, and then also my current path. So I can do GS for git status, GL for a pretty git log. I don't know, a whole variety of things. So just to show you my git config here, so you can specify an editor in here. I prefer Vim. You can have a default set of things you'd like to always exclude, and then I have a whole bunch of aliases. This is not something that I would recommend that you just copy and paste out of here or from anybody else. What is better if you take a more organic approach, and if you find that you type the same thing over and over and over again, or you have some really long, really complicated thing that you want to be able to run in the future, then create your own aliases. Otherwise, you'll do like I did, and you'll copy them, and you have all this stuff like I don't know what this means, what this syntax is, how to use it. So yeah, you're better off just not even to bother copy and pasting. Just create your own aliases in bash, create them in git, and then you'll find that git gets significantly easier to use. Here again, if you have your own git repository, great. If you don't, make one on GitHub, track your config files. That way when you move to a new machine, you don't have to try to remember everything you've made an alias for. You can just, check out your branch and you're golden, you're good to go. Lots of good resources on the internet for doing stuff like that. So that's all I wanted to cover in this video. Next time we'll cover a little bit more in depth on specific branches, how to do things in DAF maybe. But this is useful, I think, to everybody, whether you're at Purdue or not. If you're going to be using a tool, you should spend the extra effort to A, learn how to use it, but B, make it comfortable to use so that you're motivated to keep using it. With a little bit of practice, this will go much faster than trying to do, clicking through a GUI or anything like that, and inside of a couple of weeks it should be second nature. So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.